Hello, everybody. Welcome to today's live. I'm your host, Ritika Subhash, and I welcome you to today's episode from all of us at the Parent Academy. And today, my guest is someone who's very special. She is not just a new mom, but she is an entrepreneur in her own right. And today, she's going to be telling us about something that is so important for everyone, whether you're a parent or not, because money matters. Yes? So please join me in welcoming Rashmi Shenoy D'Souza. Rashmi, welcome to this live.
Thank you so much, Ritika. Pleasure to be here.
Lovely. So, just for the benefit of our listeners, I'm going to do a brief introduction. Rashni is she's a personal finance coach, and she helps people build investing habits, something that all of us can, really use and grow with. And so she helps people grow their wealth. She's a chartered accountant and a financial risk manager with over 17 years of experience. And she's has experience in investing, wealth creation, and I love this title that she's given to herself, which is she's a financially free mom. Now, this Rashmi is, I think, one of the most coveted titles, and something that all of us want to achieve, because when we become mothers, and especially in our setup, in our environment, mothers are largely the primary caregiver. Of course, there are other families where sometimes the father or the grandparents are the primary caregiver, but largely mothers are the primary caregiver. And if they are financially free, or if they feel financially sorted, I feel they can do so much more in their parenting journey. They can be so much more available to their child without this thought in running in their back of the head, that I have to manage my finances as well, because that is where my sustenance is coming from. So once again, a big welcome to you. And tell me a little bit about this linkage that you make between parenting and finance.
Sure, sure. I think I'll start off with the title of the parenting course that you have actually, the conscious parenting course. So, to put it in a very brief and a smart way, or a crisp way, I would say, conscious parenting plus smart finances will lead to a stress-free life for any family. I think that's what I would like to summarize it as, and that's what we are here to sort of discuss and go through, isn't it? That's the journey we want to take, where people listening to us today at the start, if they have any stress with relate in relation to money matters in their family, respect to children, planning for their future, etc. I think when they get to the end of the show, they should have at least reduced that stress by a certain percentage. That's what I aim to achieve with this.
Absolutely. So why don't we start with your journey? Can you give us a brief intro into how did you reach this state of having financial freedom as a mom, and you're a new mom. There's still so much that you are going to achieve in your parenting journey. But how did you get off to such a fabulous start? Can you tell us a little bit about that?
Right. I think one could be the luck factor as well. I'll just start off with that because I am obviously not a very young mom. I think knowing that you mentioned the 17 years of experience. So obviously, I had time to build that wealth. And the main factor in all of this that I want to talk about and highlight is time, right? Even when you look at all the posts that I put everywhere, somewhere something is about time because everyone, when I say I'm a financial coach or I've done this for myself, I think the first thing people ask, no matter how well aware, well educated, and where they are in their journey, paise kahan dalu? And where should I invest my money? I mean, that's not really, a one-line answer or something to say. Just do this and you will get there. It's not that one, two, three, and done. It's not that sort of a process. This entire thing takes time, and that is the main factor in all of this, right? So, to briefly take you through my journey, I qualified as a chartered accountant like before I turned 23 years old, and I was part of Big Four in my earlier years, where my internship was with Big Four, and also my first job was with Big Four. Given the intense work culture and lack of work-life balance, so as to put it, Me and my friend had this big dream at that point saying, if we have 1 crore in our bank account, we will buy a house.
Rashmi, I think there is a
And
little
if
at your
that,
end. I'll just pause you there. There's slight lag at your end. Maybe if you want to check, is it the internet or maybe it's the headphones? So just see if you can try without it because I don't want anybody to miss what you're saying. Is just so valuable. So
sure,
potentially
sure. I've shut all
do
my other windows. I think the internet should work good now. It was just a pause, probably. Am I audible
potentially
now? Is it good?
you are, but do you want to try without the headphones or is that
Should
fine?
I?
Is this fine?
Right. Yeah, I think it's okay if I'm audible. Should be good.
Okay. Yes.
Yeah.
So you were saying that you were discussing just if you had 1 CR in your bank account, what would you do?
We could forget about all the appraisals and all this pressure to perform and climb up the corporate ladder, and we could retire happily. That was the dream then. You can imagine. This is like I'm talking about around between 2008 and 2011. This was somewhere in between that period, right? That's when we started. We discussed that way, but then I think it became my dream and obsession. So
Yeah.
I started off thinking that, I will want to, at some point when I have a baby, when I have a family of my own, at least sort of step down the gas and not really work in an environment so competitive. And therefore, it would obviously mean that I will have to compromise on the cash flows that come in at that point in time as well. So that was the plan to sort of say that I will have a baby at a point in time, and then I'll have a break, and then because obviously maternity will need a break, and then kind of have a career pivot, etc. And I will make sure to fund this period by myself so that I will not be dependent on my husband or in-laws at that point when it happens. So I sort of achieved that 1 crore mark pretty early on, but again, like inflation and life, everything happens, right? So we are not really sure. And then how much is really enough? I think that's the big question everybody today would have in their mind when we say financially free. But what I want to tell everyone on that aspect is that it's about us drawing a line around the lifestyle we want, the priorities we have for life. So, for example, me and my husband are very crazy about traveling, not necessarily owning a house at this stage in our life, right? I don't know how many would agree with that, right? Everybody would want a house and then they would lock themselves up in a liability and an EMI and then everything becomes so distant. But I guess it's all priorities, and then when you have those priorities set, the number isn't very hard to achieve. Also, I would like to also put this in perspective to say that financially free was for me to sort of have this break in peace, not be in a hurry to go back and start, stretching myself too thin between the corporate and home and looking after my baby. So it was more about taking that break, doing something for myself in that period, and sort of getting back to being me before I jump and start my career again in a different way. So that was the reason I did that, and that's how I got into the whole planning to say that I need a break of about say 3 to 5 years. What are my expenses like for a year? So since I had been tracking all my expenses right from the time I started being a CA, I think opening Excel sheets is more easier than opening even Google Chrome for us when we are
Yes.
interns. So I used to do that anyway, and I did that with my investments as well. So every month I got my salary, I used to calculate what is the percentage I'm saving and investing, and I always used to try to keep it to 70%, which I never met. But because I was targeting so high, I used to at least save like 60% of my savings from the time I turned, into the middle management. I got into that category because that is when your salaries are good and you can afford to save a big chunk as well. So that's how I kind of got to it. But I guess it'll be too much of my journey if I get into the specifics.
No, so let me summarize some key highlights of your journey because this is important. One thing you mentioned is time. Uh, am I audible or is there a little bit
Yes,
of a
yes,
lag?
absolutely.
Okay. So the time factor, and through your journey, I could clearly see that you had planned your finances at least 10 years in advance of becoming a parent. you could foresee that somewhere down the line you will want to take some time off for yourself, for your family, and that was a planned thing, right? A lot of times what happens is when parents, especially the parents that I work with, because I work with them after delivery, like after they've gotten the child home, they feel like, did we should we have thought of it earlier? So the answer to that is yes. Financial planning, maybe if not 10 years, at least 4 or 5 years in advance, when you know that you are going to be building a family, would be a great time. 10 years is excellent, even more is better. But what about those who have now started this journey, and they are not really fully prepared? So with you, planning was in place, your self motivation was in place, you made it your personal goal, kind of. You maybe had the right support system, you had clarity on your goals, right? So for a young person to have this clarity that I will choose flexibility and travel and adventure and learning from the environment more than, let's say, the safety and security of a house. Like, I mean, many people look at it that way, right? It's an emotional decision to buy a house and all of that,
Correct,
so we
correct,
don't
correct,
really
correct.
think too much about the EMI perspective. So now tell me, what about somebody who has become a parent? Where can they start?
Right. I think planning is still key. And when it comes to investment and finances, I think I also want to break the myth that you are never too late or too early. Any time is a good time. And if you've not started, just start today. Just start today. It's not worth waiting for tomorrow or waiting for next year until you have a certain amount of money, until you have done something else. Don't ever think of it that way. Planning starts today. Okay, so we are in this conversation. I will simplify it for you. And when we say planning and preparation, I would say prepare. Of course, as a couple, you could always sort out your priorities if you have not had kids yet, to say how many years is the timeline to have a child, to buy a house, etc. If you have a child, I think the best thing to do is to start looking at your short-term expenses versus long-term, right? So long-term, a lot of us as parents have a lot of aspirations for our child. Some of us want a fancy education abroad. Some of us want a wedding of the year, a destination wedding maybe. Some of us want to leave a legacy. Some of us want to leave, like, maybe a plot or a apartment, something that generates rent and gives them some sort of income security. So all these aspirations are probably all over the place in terms of us being parents and with our emotions that are in play with that. So I would like you to look at that and sort of prioritize to say what is most important for me and what is it that I should start planning right now. And the rest could be aspirational, because then, as and when you get there, you can always plan for it. Because all of these which I'm talking are long term, because your kids are still kids, and all of these which I'm talking are when they turn into adults. So,
Yeah.
if you get your promotions, you get into better jobs, you upskill yourself, probably there'll be more cash flows, and you can do more aspirational goals. But at least shortlist one or two big goals and start planning, start investing for these goals, right? Because again, I'll go back to the time factor, and the earlier you start, the more easily your money will compound and it will give you fabulous results. The later you start, the more money you need to make even less amount of purpose for any funding sort of any
So
sort
I'll
of these
repeat
goals,
that
right?
for I'll repeat that for everyone. So the earlier that you start, you get more years with which you compound, the wealth that you have. Which means that, let's say, you earned a certain percentage in a year, and the same percentage, including the principal amount, keeps there in the corpus, is there. So the next year, that percentage that you get on it will be compounded. So basically, you are really looking at an exponential growth if you look at potentially doing it for the longer term. And if you start
Correct.
late, it's still good, but you to have a certain goal that I want to achieve, like a 1 CR or a 2 CR or a 3 CR as my retirement, you will just have to put larger amounts every month. Is that ballpark okay? Is that right, Rashmi?
Yeah, yeah, yeah. I think the numbers are just part of imagination for now. I'll get into that calculation as well in a bit. So the longer term perspective is very fair the way you put it. I'll get into the shorter term aspects as well. So short term planning, I think you should start doing budgeting for at least a quarter ahead, right? So for example, now we are in September. At least
Hmm.
look at the expenses that you foresee with respect to your children coming up in quarter four of 2024, and look at your cash flows in that same quarter. Are you able to fund them all? Do you need any funding, or should you look at cutting down on any expenses that you have? So possibly, like, there's a lot of festive spirit coming up in Q4 every year, right? There's Diwali, there's Christmas, there's a lot of gifting, partying, etc. So are we looking at splurging there? Are we looking at being within budgets? Especially when it comes to our children, we tend to spoil them with all sorts of toys and clothes and whatnot. So and how long do they really use it, etc. So think of this from a value for money perspective, and make sure you have it prioritized to say that these are the must do expenses and these are my cash flows. I will make sure to at least meet this much with my income, and the rest are, again, like I said, aspirational, right? If you get to it, great. If you don't get to it, you can try the next time, because your kids are going to be with you. This is not the only Diwali or Christmas. Don't go all the way. And that's a big one, because I think a lot of us get stuck with this, show off culture and comparison and whatnot. But I guess it's what works for your family. It's what rocks your boat and what takes it along, right? I mean, you have to look at the long run if you have to make it stress free for yourself. So I think that's
Yeah.
the two key things I would like to say. Look at it short term, do your budgeting, map your cash flows. For the long run, prioritize your aspirations and say that this is exactly what I definitely want to do for my child, and start a long term investment there. And when I say long term investment, I'm sure everybody kind of listens to things like SIPs and this and that. So that's where your long term things will be. Because compounding, again, getting back to the numbers, Ritika, you were mentioning, compounding addresses a big elephant in the room in terms of these numbers and finances that we talk, which is inflation. Inflation being the killer of your money. Wherever you keep it and park it, inflation will come and eat it away like a rat. So you need to make sure that your money grows at a rate where at least inflation is taken care of, and therefore compounding. So inflation is the problem, and compounding is the answer to that problem. And therefore we say time, because the more time you have, the more inflation will grow, and therefore if you do nothing, the more you lose.
Absolutely. I think what really stayed with me in all of this that you said is the short term and the long term together. And if you were first sorted with the short term, and this is something which I think this little story I'd like to share. I don't know how true this is, but I heard that this happened with Warren Buffett, wherein I don't know if you've heard this. He was out playing golf with his uber rich golf buddies, and this was a nice weekend, sort of a morning golf run. And so all of them decided that, okay, this is the hole in one, right? So we'll all get in the first swing itself, we are going to get the ball in the hole. And so everybody said, let's
Right.
bet on this for $10. Okay, so $10, let's do that. So everyone, these are uber rich people, and everybody's betting. And Warren Buffett says, no, I'm not going to bet. So everyone's like, you, what are you saying? Like, you are the richest man here, and you have problems with parting with just $10. So everybody sort of started making fun and calling him, stingy and all of that. But his response was simple. He's like, I know that there is very little chance, very little probability of me being able to drive it all in one go. So his one sentence response was, if you are foolish with the small things, you'll be foolish with the big things. So if you are really taking silly decisions with, or a lot of emotional decisions, or a lot of impulsive decisions with your short term planning, I feel that will overflow into your long term vision as well. So if you are not, at this point as parents, if you feel like it's too hard, like your baby is just in your arms, in your hands, and you can't think of their higher education or future or their marriage and all of that, which is fine, like start with the smaller term planning. So this is where my next question to you, Rashmi, comes is, what is the average, I mean, I know India is not one standard India, but what is the average cost of raising a child, and how can parents plan for it through the early years at least?
Sure. I think given the audience is here today, I look at a ballpark number with a few assumptions in place. Okay, and I'll mention all the assumptions to you because these are pretty much common, right? So
Hmm.
most of us are in probably urban area, tier one, tier two cities. We are looking at, let's say, a standard CBSE education. Our children pursuing at least one sport and one sort of a recreational activity, maybe playing an instrument or music or dance or whatever, and possibly the regular things, right? Food, clothes. whatever, the basic entertainment sort of. If I put this, all of this in a basket and look at it as a package, the cost can range anywhere from 40 lakhs to about 90 lakhs in the age span of 0 to 18 years of the child, right? So up to the age that the child turns 18, we would have spent 40 to 90 lakhs, depending on where we draw the lines and where we put them, etc. So that's sort of the range. When I give you this range and when I say 18 years, the assumption is that at least 18 years we are all definitely looking to take care of our children, right? I mean that's sort of the minimum. And then 18 is when a big, what do you say, like a steroid will hit you or something, where you feel like the big thing of, their higher education comes into play, which will sort of easily suddenly double this number up. You never know where you're planning for them or where they are opting to go or whatever in those 18 years, and then that will suddenly kind of take this number to a double or triple or whatever, depending on where the children go and what you really want to do to support them, right? So I'm trying to tell you that without even the cost of higher education, this is the numbers we are looking at.
Okay, so between 40 to 90 lakhs, which includes your formal education, your recreation, all of that. And it definitely makes sense. Like if I just basically think from a very middle class perspective, even if you stay off of a lot of luxuries and you consciously, so for example, we consciously make a decision in my family. There are certain things that we really like, so we will not compromise on, let's say, the quality of food that we buy, or the quality of, let's say, a gym subscription, or sports things and stuff like that. But what is disposable for us, which what things that we don't really align with, let's say plastic toys, for example, or excess of hoarding of things, even then, so much gets accumulated, which is the other part. I tend to declutter every 2 3 months, and I'm always amazed, where does all this clutter just come, the mound of clutter comes suddenly, and you have to do it every 2 3 months. It's almost mind boggling, maybe because if it's the unnecessary things that we buy or the gifting that happens. And now at least I'm making a practice to tell my son that, please evaluate, if you've gotten something, evaluate if you'll use it. If you'll not use it, either you politely return it, or you refuse to take it, or you basically give it to somebody who will value it more. Some things like that. Even with devices, I think that is another thing, that's a whole other conversation. But you have the right, as parents, you are the adults in the room, you have the right to have these discussions, to evaluate whether this sits well. Your child automatically after turning 10 or 12 doesn't become entitled to a device. Don't think that now they have turned 13, now I have to give them an iPad, now they have done this, now I have to give them an iPhone. There is no have to's in this. You have to, the only have to is, have you actually sat down and thought about the values of your family, your goals, like Rashmi is saying, what are your goals? Because otherwise money can also flow away very quickly, right, unless you know how to make it go in the right way. Does that make sense? I think, Rashmi, I think that's also the crux of what you're saying.
Yes, yes, absolutely. And what you're saying in terms of the parents being the adult in the room, I think I also want to draw attention to the point that they have to be really role models when it comes to money, right? I mean, what we see is what we learn. So, for example, in our generation, or at least how I was brought up, we were always told that, money doesn't grow on trees and you have to be this and that and whatever. But my dad would save the last rupee to get me a grand wedding, and he wouldn't tell me about it until my wedding. So we
Wow.
wouldn't even know there was money in the family, right? That's how it used to be. But now when you look at it, I think it has done two things for me. One, I feel like my dad always had enough, and I have that attitude of abundance, which is a very good thing. Also,
Wow.
on the other hand, that there could be that scarcity mindset, right, where you're thinking before spending every penny. So that's the reason where you need that value for money concept. And as parents, doing the role modeling in terms of spend patterns, in terms of saving, investing, if you do it, you are engaged in it. And as a matter of fact, in at home, when you're doing it, your kids will look at you, they learn from you, and they know that this is happening, right? So that's how they would pick up these habits by default. You will not have to teach them as adults later. And what we imbibe as children is pretty strong in us. It's never something that we lose. In fact, it is hard to lose what we imbibe as children, right? So
Yeah.
therefore, I think role modeling part is very essential, and not just in terms of these behaviors, also in terms of making them aware of what is an asset, what is a liability, what gives you pain, what gives you pleasure, right? In all of this, you need to know where your money is going. Therefore, you at least teach your children the same way. So if you are sort of borrowing too much to spend, let's say, and you are in that stress, the kids are only looking at that stress and learning that you need to borrow and be in this stress to survive. They think this is life. Do you
Hmm.
really want to take this, isn't it? So that's exactly why you need to look at your own patterns and behaviors as a parent in terms of where your money is spent, money is invested, money is saved, etc. Not just to plan for your kids, but also to teach them. You're teaching them in very subtle and subconscious ways when you do it consciously as adults for your own sake, right? The kids will
Hmm.
just pick up what you're doing, and it'll be very easy and smooth when they turn adults and they manage their money. So that's the other big reason why we as parents need to be very responsible on this topic.
I think one thing which I want to really ask you now from this conversation is you talked about mindset. You said your father somehow subconsciously inculcated an abundance mindset in you. I want you to talk a little bit more about these two things, the abundance and the scarcity mindset. I'll tell you why. One is, of course, I believe this is true. I do believe that our words are very powerful, and sometimes we don't realize the kinds of seeds we are sowing in the minds of our children just by a casual sentence like "paisa ped pe nahi ugte," right? um, and second is it's hard, right? Despite all of this knowledge and information, sometimes I see myself slipping, and I see myself, using these sort of scarcity wala sentences. Like
Hmm,
for
hmm,
instance,
hmm.
recently, even in your school, let's say you're already giving your fees and everything, there are some additional costs that come in which you don't even foresee. Like that's where with parents it becomes a challenge, right? Sometimes the school will say, okay, now this
Correct.
trip is coming up, pay for this, now this is coming up. So just out of my frustration one day I said like, oh, yet another check I have to write and stuff like that. So
Hmm, hmm,
somewhere
hmm.
I'm catching myself doing this off late, and this is why I wanted to seek your advice and things. How can we evaluate these sentences and maybe give them a positive spin? That is one. And second is another personal question, which is, so I think you know that my son recently performed in a play. It was
Yes.
by the government CCRT play, Rani Durgavati, and he played a part. So the because it's a part of the government initiative, he got paid a certain stipend. It's a small amount, but it's really exciting, and he's so
Special.
interested. It's special, right? I mean, that fact that you've got your first salary, he's been asking me, Mama, when did you get your first salary? When did Papa get his first salary? So, so that excitement
He's
is there, that
beaten you, I'm sure. He's beaten both of you, I'm sure.
by decades he's beaten us. Don't worry. So, so that way, I think it's nice, but, I haven't had that conversation about what we want to do with that money. His only thing was, Mama, can I donate 10% of it? And I said, yes, sure. So, which I found was really, really nice of him to think that in his first salary he wants to donate. So I asked him to pick up
A charity
something,
of his own.
a charity of his
Right.
his own interest, rather than simply giving to me, to the charity that I give. I wanted him to think.
Right.
He's like, no, no, just do it, but do it, kind of. So on these two things, the abundance and scarcity mindset, what do you have to say? And for a child, how can we encourage them to have a this thing?
Sure, sure. I think the abundance versus scarcity mindset, to me, abundance I would start with, let's say, because that's the positive and that's what we all want to inculcate, isn't it? So a simple affirmation is we are enough, we have enough, right? Because whatever we do, we survive. Whatever we do, we are resilient enough and we get on the other side. Even if, let's say, a few viewers here have a sort of, debt pressure and repayment pressure, etc. I would encourage you to look at life to say that you have survived so far and life has provided you with resources to come so far and given you the strength, right? And at least based on those sort of criteria, start telling yourself that we have enough. And when you start saying we have enough, you will also subconsciously or consciously try to live within your means and budgets. and you will start doing these plans, preparations, etc. So we are who we think. If we think we have enough, we will make it be like that, right? We will make that happen, and that's from an affirmation standpoint, of course. But like I said, in practicality, what it means is you have to plan, you have to budget, you have to map your cash flows, you have to prioritize. You will not have enough for all your wants and aspirations. You will always have enough for your needs, and that's something we have to always remember, that we prioritize and we will have always enough. But then if we do not prioritize, and if we are just living as it comes, and go happy go lucky sort of nature with money, and that's when you get into trouble. So that's
Yeah.
that's from an abundance mindset and a planning perspective.
Yeah.
I think scarcity is, like I said, because it's kind of deep rooted because of our upbringing and the way it was in the previous generations for a large part of the middle class. But I think for us, it's pretty, like a boon where we can now just say, is it worth it? Is it really necessary? And is it really delivering that much value? Sort of give it a second thought and
Hmm.
not give in to your impulses. And when you simply do that much, you will spend much lesser than what you spend, right? So the scarcity thing really helps you manage, I would say, if you have that sort of mindset. But then don't make it into a negative for yourself to say that I never have enough and this is just not ending. And don't tell yourself those sort of things, but just be conscious when you spend to say that is it necessary? Okay, like you said, Ritika, you said another trip. So another trip is really necessary, or is it like as well, trips or spends or picnics or whatever? So
Yeah. So I think we are all circling back to the idea of conscious living rather than scarcity. Let's say if you are conscious, first for consciousness, I feel the first step is you have to become aware, right? The awareness part has to be there, and awareness in every aspect. When I talk about parenting and conscious parenting, I start with self awareness, right? You are part of the cohort, Rashmi, and you know everything in my coursework is about first get aware, first get present to the fact that there are these thoughts that are in your mind, these constant chatters that are in your mind that are driving your actions and your relationships and everything subconsciously. And money is also, we have a relationship with money, right? When I talk about relationship right now, I'm talking about our relationship with money. That is also something that we need to become more aware of. And we need to introspect what has my relationship been up until, let's say, age 40 or age 18, whatever is your age right now. What is my relationship? Am I happy with that relationship? Well, if not, what needs to change, right? So does the value of money in my eyes, does that need to change? Does my approach to making money need to change? Does my approach to keeping money with me need to change? All of this comes through awareness, and it comes through introspection. It comes through the fact that you sit yourself down and tell yourself, like, this is important. Money is a very, very important factor in everybody's life. Whether it is medical or anything, we can't really move from one day to the other without money. So let's treat it like that. Let's not make it our whole life,
absolutely.
but it is a very important component of our life. And parents, this is where, as Rashmi has given you a ballpark idea, 40 to 90 lakhs, from a 0 to 18 kind of. And it all depends, are you a diaper kind of a parent, or are you absolutely a cloth diaper parent? Everything will make a difference or a dent to this. Your personal preferences will make a dent, everything. But this is a ballpark idea, and just getting aware of this and planning accordingly is something that I highly recommend. What other things can you share, Rashmi, that mothers especially, let's look at them in two categories, working and non-working. How will you potentially say, what can they do about this?
Right. I think in terms of mothers, I think again it's up to you in terms of your career aspirations versus how much time you devote to your child. So uh, it's a trend these days to also do sort of homeschooling and things, right? So if that is your goal, if that is your ultimate goal, then probably you're really looking to achieve this whole financial independence, retire early, fire number, and get to it sort of, then get into this, homeschooling business maybe. But if you're not into that, and if you're looking at traditional schooling, and then you're looking at looking at fees and the support system you have at home, etc. So as mothers, I think our priorities also revolve a lot around our support system, because
Yeah.
how would I actually fund my lifestyle, fund my kids' needs and wants, and also address my aspirations, whether it's personal or professional. How would I address? If I look at it in these three categories, right? Where is it that I get support from my family or partner, and what is it that I can do? I think that's where you need to ask yourself these questions to say, what part of life of my child do I want to be more present? Do I want to probably step back? What part of my child's life am I ready to, sort of shift gears and go full drive mode in terms of my aspirations? So
Hmm.
to kind of simplify it, let's say in my case, I was always wanting to be that stay-at-home mom in the initial baby days, because most of us these days are one and done, or at most two kids, right? You see it; it's a once in a lifetime, twice in a lifetime experience. Would you give that up for slogging at a workplace for 30 years? I mean, for me, it was a no. I wanted to enjoy my baby stages, right? So that was that
Yeah.
part of it. But I have seen a lot of moms through my life, that they also tend to focus on things like board exams, and certain times it's summer vacations, you want to do holidays with your child, whatever. So now, if that is your priority, you should start planning for those parts of their life where, if you want to be with them, how would you kind of shift your other priorities, right? And accordingly make plans around your finances, because like you said, Ritika, everything goes back to being conscious, planning, being aware, and looking at things long term. I think a lot of us tend to say, "Itna kaun sochega?" Let's just go with the flow, right?
Go with the
And
flow.
who
Yeah.
knows, my child might be bright enough. I don't think he might need me in 10th standard, whatever. I feel like
Hmm.
that is left to the child, but you as a mother, I think you have to question yourself, what do you want to do? Do you want to be there? Be there. It doesn't matter whether the child needs you or not. You will have the satisfaction of having been there. And that will give you immense happiness because you wanted it and you plan ahead.
Yes, I think this is a very important thing. Mothers and for all parents really think about what does this decision, how do I align with this. Everything does not have to have a return on investment, right? And returns may not come immediately, they may be very intangible also, but the fact that you got time to spend with your family, I mean, all of these things have to be valued, and this is what makes a family unit, right? Not everybody in the family has to play the same role, is what, again, we are now sort of deviating a little bit more towards parenting and family and all of that, but I think it's also a very important point, right? Because money, like I said, it's an underlying foundation of everything. So if you
Everything.
have a family system where one person is the person who's the primary provider earning, the other person is the primary nurturer, I think it's a fabulous arrangement. But it has to be supported in that sense, right? It shouldn't be something that is imposed on anyone. And if you are well prepared and planned for it, and if you are aware that, with this decision or with any other decision, you will have to set boundaries, you'll have to tell yourself that there are some things that are unnecessary expenditures, and you have to define, right, that how much is comfortable enough for me. You don't have to live below your means, you have to at least know what your threshold is, and try to stay sort of under it as much as possible, but you don't have to struggle as much. This is where I typically, Rashmi, when I do my coaching for parents, I do the epic financial planning boot camp as well. I tell them about this 3 jar system. There are many, I mean, I learned the 7 jar system and all of that, but just to uncomplicate it, from my parenting standpoint, the 3 jar system I think is very useful, where your first jar, in which your whatever monthly salary or whatever is going, is your necessity jar, which is your rent, your mortgage, your car, your petrol, all of that, all of the EMIs that are going, that is your necessary expenditure. And if you have not really planned enough, even if 50 to 60% of your salary is going there, it is fine. Then your next jar would be your necessity, or sorry, not your necessity, it'll be your future, abundance jar. So in your future abundance jar, it could be things like, let's say travel, or you want to buy something, a house, a car, whatever is an aspirational goal. 20 to 30% can even go there. And I tell them the last jar is something which is my favorite, which is the joy jar. It is the 10% that you save. It is everything that you desire to do. It is absolutely your something that gives you so much pleasure that you don't even skimp on it. You don't carry it over from one month to the other. So if I am saving 10%, whether it is whatever 10,000 for me or 20,000 for me, this 20,000 I am going to use this month. I am not going to be saying, acha isme se bacha ke I will keep it next. No, no, this is your joy jar. This is what has to give you so much pleasure that you feel ke चाहे वो स्पा है, चाहे whatever it is that gives me joy, I am going to use it in that month. So I don't know how much you agree with that, RSD, but this is something that I always tell people, because I feel like itna planning kar karke somewhere you lose that joy of saving or joy of living, which this joy jar actually it fixes that issue.
Yes, absolutely. I agree with that. And I think going back to my example as well, I used to, like I said, I used to track the 60, 70%, whatever. And the rest, I always used to make sure that it was spent. And like I said, I never made it to that 70 mark because of this, right? I mean, it's always that thing where you really want something and you want to indulge yourself, etc. And there's always time to come back on track. See, the crux of everything is when you have a plan and when you're tracking things, you will always find deviations and you are conscious of them and you will set right yourself. That's okay. So it's
Hmm.
just a matter of having a plan so that then you can actually enjoy a lot more.
Hmm.
Otherwise, you're just spending and feeling guilty. I think you'll even lose that enjoyment, isn't it?
Exactly. I think that enjoyment is very, very important. So let's actually come to a little bit of fun stuff, personal dive into Rashmi's life. So, what are your indulgences? What is it that you like to, you feel like, yes, already you call yourself a financially free mom, so you're already so sorted there, but still things that you would like to splurge on. What would those be?
Uh, I think, of course, beauty and spa treatments. I think being women, I think that's our weakness, isn't it? I mean, that's that. I was always like, when I used to do this planning itself, I was like, कुछ भी हो beauty fund तो बनाना है. So that was one thing. And like I
Yeah.
said, this was a very passion thing for me, like, this whole career pivot, because I think because we are in certain, let's say, like you're an engineer, I'm a chartered accountant, we get boxed into these careers. And
Hmm.
when that happens and when you're done with it for a few years, you're like, um, am I supposed to really do this kind of a job for, until retirement? Because that's the pattern we've seen with our parents, that they do jobs till retirement. And then we are like, am I also going to be the same? And I think that's where a lot of us deviate now, and we have a lot of passions. We want to indulge in things like art and hobbies and all of that, right? So I think those are your small other things where you have to invest in your hobbies, spend time doing things you love, and indulge in that sort of self-love space. For someone, it could be as simple as yoga. It could be a paid physical trainer. It could be a lot of things which mean something to you, and it does not have to mean anything to the whole world. I think when it comes to money, a lot of us carry that baggage of peer pressure. कि किसी ने घर लिया, I have to buy a house. Somebody has gone on a holiday somewhere, even I need to go or whatever. But I think that is the main thing in terms of money that we need to break, in terms of being role models to kids as well, and also for our own lives, and to make it simpler. If we have a small self-awareness sort of exercise, as a couple or as even women ourselves, it's enough, and it will be great clarity to see what is it that we want out of life, and then you will see that the path will just chart out itself, because none of us are, that sort of indulgent individuals, and we will not really plan for an Ambani wedding, I'm sure. So we will obviously be able to make it and meet our own, those dreams and aspirations that we have for ourselves and our kids and as a family. If we just look at it, take two steps back and do it as a family exercise, then yeah, we are enough and we have enough. Will just come true very easily, because when you do it as a family, everybody will think alike again, and everybody will start to look at prioritizing. So then you will actually find that you have so many unnecessary expenses when you do it as a family.
I love the positivity and the clarity that you bring to this topic, Rashmi. It is very hard to find because many, I mean, you talk to so many people who are into financial planning, risk management, so many things, and the approach is very mechanical. The approach is, I'm not saying it is wrong. Of course, they are going with numbers and everything, but
Yes.
somewhere down the line, it's not just about that, right? It's not just about numbers. You have to really understand, empathize, be very, I think accepting that people are emotional people, right? People make emotional decisions, and sometimes those are important to cater to, and sometimes goals are important to cater to. So how do you create that balance is something which I see that you're doing very well in your life, and I'm sure you can help many parents around. And one thing which I must tell parents here is, I was telling everybody about the necessity jar, the future fortune jar, and the joy jar. But let me tell you, if you invest in yourself, whether it is getting yourself a financial planner, somebody like Rashmi who can support you in this journey, whether you come to, let's say, a parenting support person like me, when I coach parents, when I give them this vision, this goals that they can achieve, I give them the right blueprint. These are your future fortune things. These are things that you cannot skimp on, right? These are things that are going to build you abundance in the long run, and you have to see it that way. So a lot of times, these things comes up, okay, why do we need a parental coach, right? If you just, and I agree, honestly, I wish I'm able to see that time when things are so sorted, and people are so sorted, and families are so well connected, and they are talking to each other, and they're supporting each other so much that people like me are not needed. I think that would really be the ultimate goal. But until that is the thing, until we are, we reach that place, and till the time we are seeing people struggling and families struggling to connect and bond and come on the same page, I think this is very important. This is your future fortune jar. I used to say that learning is part of the joy jar, and it is. Learning, ongoing learning should be part of your monthly expenditure that you should not skimp on. Whether it is, let's say, you want to practice a art or a hobby or whatever, that is your monthly learning. You should not skimp. But things like becoming a better parent, becoming a better, financially free person, all of this is your future fortune. So definitely something that I feel everyone should be looking at. I know, RSD, you are here for me, so I am going to be looking at it from that perspective. I would really want to take my journey forward with you, understanding more about finances and doing a better job of it myself. So what is how where can people find you is the next thing, because people might have more questions, they might want to connect with you. So as we wrap up, I want you to share where can people reach out. And the second thing is, this is the Parenting Truth and Dare podcast. Every time we unpack a truth, and today's truth, the biggest truth we have unpacked, is our financial literacy and our financial planning will directly impact how our children relate to money in their life. So this is something we need to consciously look at. What is the dare that you would like to give to parents? So where can they find you, and what dare would you like to give to the parents?
Sure. I think it kind of very beautifully links in with what I wanted to conclude and say why I was here in the first place, right? I said for the stress-free part of it. So let's get that back in here. In terms of where to find me, so this is my brand, Rupee Smart Drive. And like I have been stressing all the while, prepare, plan, and then you will easily prosper, right? So that's what it is. So you will find me with the same name, Rupee Smart Drive. That's the brand name, and you will find me with this name, with this username on Instagram. And you can, of course, find me as Rashmi Shenoy D'Souza on LinkedIn. A lot of you are here possibly from the LinkedIn channel as well. So you can connect with me on LinkedIn or DM me on Insta. And that's the best way to reach out to me as of now. In terms of making it stress free, I will also talk about a very important concept, which is passive income, right? I think that's the dare as well, it will be about for all
Oh,
the parents here. So
yes.
first, let me also explain passive income because this is just a live, and I'd like to bring everyone to the same page, right? So again, my time factor comes into play here. So the main thing is when all of us do our jobs, right, we are exchanging time for money. We spend the whole day at work, and we get salary at the end of the month. And most jobs today are such that they don't really leave any room for a hustle or any sort of, other jobs or anything else that you want to do. Now, if this is the case, how will you ever retire, right? You need to sustain the same sort of lifestyle with the same sort of income in your retirement, even if not early retirement, whatever. At least in real retirement, say post 60, you need to fund this lifestyle. How would you do that? Now, this income at that point, of course, multiplied with that inflation rate calculations and all the jargon I will keep aside, because everything will be maths beyond the point if I get into too much explanation. When you look at the number, what you need post retirement on a monthly basis, that needs to somehow come out of your passive income. When I say passive income, it has to come out of, let's say, you have a property you have rented out. Let's say you have shares that you've invested in that pay you dividend. Let's say you have a fixed deposit that pays you interest on a quarterly basis. You have maybe some debentures or debt instruments that pay any sort of instrument. So you have these corporate deposits as well, where you're lending to these big companies and they will pay you interest. So these are all examples that I've given you of passive income. So the dare to parents today is that please set up multiple sources of income. And when I say multiple sources of income, don't try to get into the time exchange. Please set up more assets, invest into assets which will earn passive income for you. And I have given you examples of all these assets, right? So, which is the basic being fixed deposits, a very bad one when it comes to beating inflation. The good ones would be the obvious ones, which everybody talks about all the time, your stock market indices, etc. Again, I do not want to get into the which instrument should I invest in, because that is the dare. Now you go there, you find yourself to get educated in these types of terminology and instruments that I'm talking about, and set up yourselves for at least two passive income streams, not just one, two, so that you have one for you and one for the kids' future or whatever aspirations you have for your kids, right? At some point, it has to start giving returns, even if it's 20 years later. It has to be an asset that you invest in today so that you get that passive income, let's say 20 years down the line, which can help you, whatever, help your kids have a grand wedding, have their dream education abroad, whatever. So set up two passive income streams. That is my dare to the parents.
I think that's lovely. That is a fabulous dare to give, and I should have seen it coming. I should say. Um, so great. I think just to summarize it for parents, of course, the obvious ones are there: the FD and the mutual funds, the SIPs that you do, and the real estate and gold. These are the obvious ones. Some of the non-obvious ones are, let's say, you've written a book, then having that book, promoting that book, trying to see if you can get any kind of collaborations where that book can potentially earn you royalty, or creating something. Like we are in the middle of the creation economy, right? So creating digital products, creating things that can then potentially be taken to the masses, and that can also be part of your passive income stream. And yeah, I think these are all great ideas, Rashmi. I'm so looking forward to continuing to be on this journey and inspiring more and more parents, along with your help, to be able to come onto this journey, because the financial well-being of the family determines the tone in the environment of the family. And I feel everybody deserves a shot at abundance. Everybody has the wherewithal and the capacity to become more abundant than what they already are, if you just put some things in place. Like everybody's life is different, but you need to have some blueprint in place. And I'm so thankful for you and for Rupee Smart Drive for giving us that framework and blueprint today. Thank you so much for your time, Rashmi, and I look forward to connecting again with you at some other platform, and having a more deeper discussion into possibly some instruments as well. All right,
It was a
thank
great,
you.
it was a great discussion, Ritika. Thank you, and the pleasure is all mine. I've had a great
Thank
time in this conversation, and I'm glad I've been able to dispel myths and spread some awareness on financial literacy and concepts and
Absolutely.
money matters.
Absolutely. Thank you so much, and see you around.
Thank you.